everyone, this is Bhavita from Edureka, and I welcome you all to this session where we'll be understanding what exactly is NoSQL. Before we get started, let's take a look at the agenda for today. Firstly, we're going to start off by understanding what exactly is NoSQL and then see why we need NoSQL. With that, we'll move on to understand the features and then types of NoSQL databases, and then we'll also see the differences between RDBMS and NoSQL. Finally, we'll look at the misconceptions of NoSQL databases and close up today's session with some of the examples. I hope the agenda was clear. Now, before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to Edureka YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Also, if you're interested in online training certification, do check out the link given in the description box below. Firstly, what exactly is a NoSQL database? Now, NoSQL databases are non-tabular databases and store data differently than rational tables. Basically, NoSQL databases come in a variety of types based on their data model. Now, of course, we'll look into the types right ahead in our session today. Now, they provide flexible schemas. They scale easily with large amount of data and high user loads. Basically, when people use the term NoSQL database, they typically use it to refer to any non-relational database. Some say the term NoSQL stands for non-SQL, while the others say it stands for not only SQL. Now, either way, most agree that NoSQL databases are databases that store in a format other than relational tables. Now, assuming that being understood, to understand better about NoSQL, we need to be comparing it with SQL type of database. Now, here I've considered 2 pointers in terms of differentiating between SQL and NoSQL, the first being scalability. Well, you can say from the picture here that SQL is basically vertically scaled, which means all the larger servers will scale the data vertically upwards. Now, in NoSQL, it is scaled out across commodity servers. This way, the data is not being compressed. The next thing is data storage models. Now, with respect to data storage models, you can say by the picture again that tables with fixed rows and columns are being incorporated in SQL, while NoSQL follows a JSON document, which means it's a type of document based where you will have key value pairs. Now, wide column, which has tables with rows and dynamic columns. There'll be also graph, which has nodes and edges. Now, assuming that's understood, we'll understand why exactly do we need NoSQL. The rise of NoSQL database is an important event in computer science and technological industry. Many other forms of database technology have come and gone, but few have had the wide adoption of NoSQL. So why exactly is NoSQL so popular? Now, these reasons that I have mentioned here will make it clear. The first being the pace of the development in NoSQL databases, which can make much faster queries and processing of data rather than SQL database. The next thing being the structure of different forms. So basically, the structure of many different forms of data is more easily handled and evolved with a NoSQL database. Here, NoSQL databases are often better suited to storing and modeling structured or even semi-structured or perhaps unstructured data in our database. The next reason being the amount of data in many applications cannot be served affordably by SQL database, and hence NoSQL database were created to handle big data as part of their fundamental architecture. Finally, the scale of traffic. Basically, the scale of traffic and need for zero downtime cannot be handled by SQL. This is where the scale out of architecture of NoSQL comes in very handy. The scale out strategy used by most NoSQL databases provides a clear path to scaling the amount of traffic a database can handle. Now, if that is not enough, there are some more added advantages of using database. They are analytics, scaling, redundancy, flexibility, and rapid development. Speaking of analytics in the first place, NoSQL database is suitable for doing analytical queries. Querying language used for atomic queries can also be used for analytical queries. Speaking of scaling, as we discussed earlier, the database is preferred because it is designed to scale, and NoSQL are designed to easily scale out when they actually grow. Data is divided and balanced among multiple nodes in a cluster, and by default, aggregate queries are divided. Redundancy, as NoSQL database is designed while keeping redundancy in concern, the database is designed to handle hardware failures instead of treating them. The problem of hardware failure is handled during the time of development itself. Flexibility. Now there is a huge flexibility in how the data is stored, which increases the performance of your NoSQL database. Finally, a rapid development. The database provides an easy way to change the way data is stored or change the queries that are running. Batch processing and simple refactoring are done to accomplish massive changes. Now, if that is not enough, we have some more reasons to use NoSQL. They go as fast-paced agile development, storage of structured and semi-structured data, huge volumes of data, requirements of scale-out technologies, and modern application paradigms like microservices and real-time streaming. Having that understood, we can dive deep into the features of NoSQL database. Now, firstly, we have something called as flexible schema. So basically, this flexible schema will make sure that it facilitates the mapping of documents to an entity or an object. Now, each document can match the data fields of the represented entity, even if the document has substantial variation from other documents in the collection. The next feature goes like horizontal scaling. Basically, relational databases is difficult, and hence our horizontal scaling comes in picture and handy in order for us to make the NoSQL database simple. Basically, horizontal scaling means it is scaling out of the data and bringing additional nodes to the share load. This is very difficult with relational databases due to the difficulty in spreading out related data across nodes. Now, with non-relational databases or our NoSQL databases, this is made simpler since collection of a self-contained and non-coupled relational are present. The next thing is fast queries due to data model. The application usage of the data as well as the inherent structure of the data itself is made extremely fast as there is extremely flexible schemas available. Finally, ease of use for the developers. Basically, NoSQL has always devoted abundant time and energy to make sure that the developers have great experience. For users to have good experience, it is always important that the developers have ease of developing the application in order to make the application readily usable. Now, some more added features of NoSQL are displayed here. First being dynamic schemas. Now, basically, NoSQL databases permit to insert of the data without predefined schema. As a result, real-time application changes can be made easily without the need to worry about service interruptions. This makes development faster, more reliable, less time consuming for data administrator. Auto shredding is another thing. Horizontal shredding is done in a NoSQL database, that is, servers are added instead of increasing the capacity of a single server. It provides an auto shredding feature that is automatically spreads data across various number of servers. Replication is another important feature where the database allows automatic database replication. It is done to maintain availability in case of outages. Some sophisticated NoSQL database provide automated recovery, and full self-healing. To enable data localization and to withstand regional failures, it can distribute the data across multiple geographic regions. Simple API. NoSQL offers interfaces that are easy to use for storing and querying the data. APIs allow selection methods and low-level data manipulation. It uses no standard-based query language. Integrated caching. NoSQL database have integrated caching capability that they frequently use for data. And in this system, memory can be removed as they need separate of cache layer. Further, let's move on and understand the types of NoSQL databases. Firstly, we have document-based databases. Basically, here in document database, the data is stored in form of JSON, which means JavaScript object notation format. Now, each document contains pair of fields and values. The values can typically be a variety of types, including things like strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, or even objects. The next thing we have is key value database. Here, the key value database are basically similar type of database where each item contains keys and values, as the name suggests. The next thing we have is column-oriented database. Here, the white column stores a data in tables, rows, and even dynamic columns. Finally, we have graph database. Here, the data is being stored in nodes and edges. Nodes typically store information about people, places, and things, while edges store information about relationships between these nodes. Now, having all the types understood briefly, let's dive deep into it and understand it completely along with its use cases. Firstly, we have document database. Now, document database, as said earlier, stores data in JSON, BASIN, or even XML format. In a document database, documents can be nested and particular elements can be indexed faster by querying. Document databases are popular with developers because they have flexibility to rework their document structures as needed to suit their applications. Now, with that being understood, we should understand that document databases are popularly used in e-commerce platforms, trading platforms, or even mobile app development across all industries. The next thing that we have and have already discussed is key value stores. The simplest type of NoSQL database is key value stores, as we have already established. Now, every data element in database is stored as a key value pair consisting of an attribute name or key and a value. Now, I can take an example as a state name to be an attribute, while the name of the state, for example, Florida, as a value. Now, having that example understood, some of the use cases of key value stores type of NoSQL database is the usage in shopping carts, user profiles, or even user preferences. The next thing that we have is column-oriented database. Now, here in column-oriented database, while a rational database stores in rows and reads data row by row, a column store is organized as a set of columns. Basically, this means that when you want to run analytics on a small number of columns, you can read those columns directly without consuming memory with the unwanted data. Columns are basically often of the same type and benefit from more efficient compression, making reads even faster. Now, most used column-based database is in the field of analytics. Analytics majorly uses column-oriented database. Finally, we have graphical database. A graph database focuses on relationship between data elements. Each element is stored as node. The connections between elements are called links or relationships. In a graph database, connections are first-class elements of the database, stored directly. The use cases here includes fraud detection, social networks, and even knowledge graphs. With that, let's move on to differences between RDBMS and NoSQL. Now, the reason I have considered RDBMS is majorly when you say NoSQL, people tend to confuse it with RDBMS. So, why not address it? The first difference being in the type of database. Basically, RDBMS is called a relational database, while NoSQL is called distributed database. Now, in general, they do not have any relations between any of the database. When RDBMS uses structured data to identify the primary key, there is a proper method in NoSQL to use unstructured data. And that brings us to the next point, which means that RDBMS is mostly structured and NoSQL is mostly unstructured. Finally, about the scalability. RDBMS is scalable vertical while NoSQL is scalable horizontal, and hence in RDBMS servers have to be added and power has to be increased. This makes scalability in RDBMS basically expensive, while NoSQL we just need to add more machines, and this does not make the database expensive. Some of the more differences that's identified in case of RDBMS and NoSQL are flexibility of schema, scaling techniques, support of transaction, reliance on data to object mapping. Now, these differences basically highlights that data models between relational databases and non-SQL can be existing in these features. Having that understood, let's move on to our next part, which is most common misconceptions of NoSQL database. Now, over the years, many misconceptions about NoSQL database have been spread through the developer community. Relationship data is best suited for relational databases. NoSQL database do not support ACID transactions. Now, what exactly is ACID transactions? I'll brief you quickly about it. ACID basically is an acronym for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. Together, this is known as ACID property. It guarantees that all commands that make up a transactions are treated as single unit. Consistency guarantees that changes made within the transaction are consistent. Isolation guarantees that concurrent transactions do not affect each other's outcome, while durability guarantees that once the database has told the client, it has written the data. Now, coming back to our misconceptions, it is said that NoSQL database do not support ACID transactions like I mentioned, but in reality, it does. The next common misconception is that NoSQL database or non-relational databases do not store relationship data. Well, NoSQL database can store relationship data. They just store it differently than relational database do. And then there is NoSQL data models allows related data to be nested within a single data structure. Now, that is because NoSQL databases are to be easier than relational database because related data doesn't have to split between the tables. Now, clearing up those misconceptions, we will move to final part of today's session, which is examples of NoSQL database. Now, by now, we already know some of the examples that involves NoSQL database. Majorly, MongoDB, which is predominantly used in today's industries, no matter which kind of industry you fall into. CouchDB, of late being very popular is CouchDB and even Couchbase for that matter. Cassandra, another popular database, Apache HBase. Now, these are some of the well-known ones in the industry. Of course, there are many more if you dive deep in. Now you can select anything that comes in handy and facilitates your kind of field. Having that understood, we have come to the end of today's session. I hope today's session was useful and you understood everything regarding what is NoSQL and all your doubts are cleared. If still you have some more doubts, you can put down in the comment section below and we will answer it at the earliest. Until we meet again next time, happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!